Welcome to today's Wednesday webinar. My name is Bailey Parker. We will be covering protecting deceased loved ones from identity theft. This is a topic that we actually haven't covered in a Wednesday webinar before, but it's something that is important. It's something that if you have had a deceased loved one be a victim of identity theft, you know that this is something that you need to think about. Unfortunately, I know I've had a family member be a victim of identity theft after they passed away, and it can be really tricky to recover from this and figure out where to go from after. So prevention is the key, and knowing what to do to protect your loved one after they pass away is really the key here. So my name is Bailey Parker, and I'm the Communications and Public Information Director here at SCDCA. I always have to give this, so if you are if you are new here, this is new to you, but if you have been around, you've heard this a billion times. This presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading any laws discussed or seeking legal counsel. I'm not an attorney. You don't want legal advice from me. And this is not meant to serve as a substitute for that. The presentation is merely serving as an introduction and overview of the topic. This is where we're headed today. I'll give you a quick intro to who SCDCA is, and then we'll talk about what is identity theft of deceased individuals. So what is that really? And then we'll talk about how it happens. We'll go into the red flags, so what you should watch out for. So if you do have a loved one that passed away and some things start to happen down the line that may be suspicious, we'll identify those red flags. And then who to notify. So after a loved one dies, there is a process that you need to take to notify certain agencies, federal agencies, and credit reporting agencies of their death. This is a prevention tool. There also are additional protections that we'll talk about. So, what is identity theft of deceased individuals? So, deceased identity theft, also known as ghosting, not the type of ghosting that a lot of young people talk about, where you may stop talking to somebody that you went on a couple of dates with and then you just stop talking to them. But ghosting in the sense of you steal somebody's identity who has passed away occurs when somebody uses the personal information of somebody who has passed away to commit fraud specifically. So here are some specific examples of that. They could use that person's identity to open new credit accounts, apply for loans, or make other financial transactions in that deceased person's name. They could try and assume that deceased person's identity in honestly any way that that person could when they were living, but often it could be to obtain a new driver's license or a passport in their name. They also could use that person's information to law enforcement to escape criminal prosecution or attempt to claim the deceased's Social Security benefits as if they were still living. This is not an exhaustive list of the ways that a deceased person's information could be used in identity theft. So this is just a few of the most common ways that it happens. But really, anybody's information, whether they're alive or deceased, can be used for identity theft in any way that you could use it. So just know that information, private identifying information, is worth a lot of money to thieves, and they want that so that they can sell it or use it for themselves. So how does this usually happen? So a lot of death records are public information and can be easily accessed online, unfortunately. And then also, we as family members or friends don't shred important documents that contain our loved one's private identifying information, or PII, as I'll refer to it in some slides as we go forward, after their death. So after somebody's death, especially a close loved one, the last thing we may be thinking of is, well, I need to go in to my mom or dad's filing cabinets and start shredding their documents. You might not even be thinking about that because you're going through a grief process, right? So we put that off. We put that off for a long time. So the longer we put things off like that, the longer of an opportunity that we give identity thieves to use information like that to steal your loved one's identity after they die. So we don't shred those important documents. And because a lot of these death records are made public, unfortunately, these thieves will use this information, and there have been reports of thieves using that information to know, oh, okay, so this house may be vacant at this time. So they'll break into the home of the person who passed away and steal either files or just things within the home. So know that we want to get rid of these important documents that contain all of these very sensitive pieces of information as soon as possible. And as I mentioned, family members are going to be preoccupied with funeral arrangements or dealing with other issues associated with the death. So it's going to be difficult to notice if somebody is using their loved one's identity to commit fraud. You may not be in the right mindset to recognize that, okay, there's a bill that showed up a couple months after your dad died, and it's for a credit card that was just opened up, or a loan that was just opened up, or somebody opened up a utility account in their name. In whatever way that somebody can steal somebody's identity, you are preoccupied in that grief process. You may not even know that these things are happening because you're not in the right mindset. And no, I'll mention this in a few slides, that it's not just strangers, unfortunately, that this is perpetrated by. Family members and friends also can be the identity thieves themselves. So especially in these estate situations, family members may end up stealing information, important documents, or even money, and you may not notice because you were busy arranging the funeral or trying to get together the estate, things like that. So this is just a couple of examples of how it may happen. So what types of PII, or personal identifying information, are involved? Really, honestly, any type of PII can be involved, but most importantly, social security numbers are involved here. Your driver's license or passport, financial accounts. This includes credit cards, bank account numbers, maybe investment accounts, any type of financial account. Contact information such as phone numbers, emails, home addresses. All of this is information that can be easily found online also, especially when we are writing obituaries or when they have social media accounts that may just be sitting there now unused. Birthplaces, mother's maiden name, and more. So any way we can use private identifying information for ourselves, identity thieves can use that information for themselves also. So we have to think that way when it comes to our loved ones. If a loved one passed away, then an identity thief can use their information after they die just in any way they could have when they were alive. So here are some of those main red flags of deceased identity theft. So you start receiving phone calls or letters from businesses or organizations addressed specifically to your deceased relative. This could often look like, I know in my family's case, when this happened, I had a sister that passed away when she was 20 years old. And it really wasn't until about a year after she passed away, all of a sudden my parents started receiving letters in the mail that from a credit card company. It was actually, this makes me laugh now. It was Hallmark, like the card company, Hallmark. They had a credit card at the time. Maybe they still do. I don't know. But somebody had opened up a Hallmark credit card in my sister's name, and obviously did not pay the bills because, you know, identity thieves don't pay bills. That'd be nice if they did. But they started receiving all of these bills for my sister, who had been deceased for over a year at that point. That is a huge red flag, obviously. And at that point, my parents, and this was decades ago, my parents had no clue what to do. My parents said, who do we even contact? And we don't even know where to go at this point. Now, the resources are abundant, and that's why we're here, right? I'm here to tell you exactly where to go. But if you start receiving those letters in the mail or phone calls, maybe from a debt collector saying that your loved one, they're saying, hey, we're looking for John Smith, and John Smith has been deceased for a number of months, and they say that John Smith owes some sort of debt, that may be a red flag. Now, of course, there's plenty of other scams out there. So this is a point where you need to check your credit report. We'll talk about that in just a second. But if you start receiving multiple phone calls, multiple letters from businesses and organizations that are addressed specifically to your deceased relatives, that could be a major red flag. Another one is you see that unfamiliar activity on your loved one's credit report. I mentioned checking that credit report, or on financial accounts. Say you now have control over those credit cards that your loved one had, and all of a sudden you start seeing charges on these credit cards that you are not making. Yeah, that's a sign of fraud. Somebody is using those credit cards. If you are receiving those phone calls, as I mentioned at the very beginning, saying that there's a debt in the name of your deceased loved one that you're unsure about, if you're unsure if that debt is actually in your loved one's name, you check the credit report, because that debt is going to be there if it's actually theirs. So that's how you would check to see if the debt was there. But you should be checking that credit report anyways, including your own. You should be checking those regularly to see if there's any unfamiliar activity. And unfamiliar activity would be opening of new loans, new credit cards, any utility accounts. As I've mentioned over and over again, they can use your information in any way that you can, right? And same goes for your deceased loved ones. So anything that could go on a credit report, they could use that information for. So if you see anything that has happened after your deceased loved one died, then that's a major red flag. You're contacted by debt collectors for debts you know nothing about. I've mentioned this, so you get those calls. You get letters from those debt collectors, and you don't know anything about these things. You check that credit report, and if it's there, then you know something's wrong, okay? You know that somebody has most likely stolen the identity of your loved one who's passed away. But there's also the other side of this. There are a ton of just debt collection scams in general, where debt collection scammers will call and say you owe a debt that you most likely don't. You check your credit report anyway, and it might not be there. They're just trying to get you to pay, trying to scare you into doing that. That's why you're checking your credit report, okay? You're always checking your credit report. You receive a tax bill or a notice from the IRS for a year in which your relative did not file a return. So that's going to come in the mail, okay? They're not going to call you. That's another red flag. The IRS is not going to call you. Just want to say that up front. The IRS will even tell you that themselves. If you do owe a debt to the IRS, they do hire outside debt collectors to call But if you owe them something, they will first send you a letter in the mail. And oftentimes, second time around, they'll send you a letter the second time around, and then the debt collector will call with information to verify that they work with the IRS. But the IRS will never directly call you. You'll receive that tax bill for your deceased loved one in the mail. This is a huge red flag also, that somebody is using their information to file tax returns and potentially get those tax benefits or tax returns in their name. So what do? How do we prevent this? Really, prevention is notifying everybody that you can that your loved one has passed away. So who do we notify after a loved one passes away? Number one, the Social Security Administration. So most funeral homes here in South Carolina, if you're working with a funeral home, will report the death of an individual to DHEC. So the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, who will then report to the Social Security Administration. And they'll need the deceased Social Security number to do so. But I'm telling you, don't rely on them, because this could take a long time. It could take a decent amount of time for the report to go from the funeral home to DHEC to the Social Security Administration. I would report it yourself, because that's going to be the quickest thing. And the faster you can report means the faster it's going to be reported to the Social Security Administration, and then there's going to be a death notice on the account for their Social Security number, and that is going to be a safeguard if anybody starts trying to use that Social Security number. So I wouldn't rely on the funeral home or DHEC automatically. I would do it yourself. Now, if you do it yourself and DHEC does it too, great, awesome. It doesn't hurt that it's happening a couple of times. So how do you do this? You can notify the Social Security Administration directly by calling them. This is the number. Or by visiting the local Social Security Administration office in Columbia. It's just downtown. You can't do this online. I looked it up. Can't do it online. You've either got to call them or go directly into their office. So again, download the slides, and there are in the next couple of slides going to be links that I've linked in there. So you're going to want to download the slides so you'll have those direct links. So call them directly to report the death of your loved one. They are going to ask for their Social Security number, okay? And here is one thing to know. The Social Security Administration is not going to be calling you asking for your loved one's Social Security number, okay? The Social Security Administration is not calling anybody asking for your private identifying information or anybody in your family's private identifying information. So when you call them directly, they will ask you for the Social Security number of your loved one. And just know, okay, I'm the one that called them. This is the number. I'm the one that called them. That's the key here. They didn't call you. If they called you, then it's a scam. Or just, if you're worried about that, go directly into your local Social Security Administration office. The Social Security Administration may periodically send a notification to the 3 major credit reporting agencies, CRAs. In the next couple of slides, I may refer to them as, regarding those who have died, but it's not guaranteed. And the Social Security Administration website even says that. It's not guaranteed that they're going to do this periodically. So this is where the next slide comes in and is very important. The credit reporting agencies, or the CRAs, you need to reach out to them each individually and notify them of your loved one's death. So you will immediately, and when I say immediately, it should be one of the first things you should be doing, along with all of the other estate things you're taking care of. It should be in the plan when you're taking care of all of your loved ones' after death needs, immediately contact the credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. The links that I have in here go directly to each of the credit reporting agencies' credit steps after death pages, because they each have their own page. You will notify them after death, and once notified, check to make sure that there's a death notice on each of the credit reports. There'll be a flag on each of the credit reports that will say deceased, do not issue credit. This is extremely important. That means if anybody were to get that social security number and try and go out and apply for credit cards in your loved one's name, then that credit card company would go do like a soft credit check or even a hard pull, and they would see on that credit report, deceased, do not issue credit, and they'd be like, oh yeah, no, we're not touching that. This is fraud, and they would report that fraud. You do, and there's a specific way to contact the credit reporting agencies. I'll show you in the next slide. But you'll request the credit reports on behalf of your deceased individuals to understand what creditors and lenders you need to contact too. So that way you can monitor those accounts for fraudulent activity. We do have a guide specifically called Credit Reports, What They Are and Why They Matter. It's a full guide that tells you about how you can pull your credit reports, and it's got a full checklist of what to check for on credit reports, what you should be going through, what to look out for. It's free. You can download it on our website. I've linked it. It's a PDF form, or you can actually order them on our website and we'll send them to you in your mailbox for free if that's what you're interested in. But this is a really great tool if you really don't know what to look for when you're looking at your own credit report, but let alone your loved one's credit report who recently passed away. If you notice any fraudulent activity, that's when you call us. So you call us and you report that identity theft. We have an entire identity theft unit where we have actual human beings answering the phone, and we can help walk you through that process. I mentioned that there's specific ways you have to notify the credit reporting agencies of your loved one's death. Oh, okay. Next, you have to contact the lenders and creditors directly to also notify them that the account holder is deceased. The credit reporting agencies aren't going to do that either. So if there's any loans open, if there's any credit cards open, you will have to contact each individual lender, creditor, whoever, even utility company, say the utility account or a cell phone account is on that credit report. You'll have to contact them and let them know that your loved one has passed away. And all of that information will be on the credit report, including the contact information for that lender and creditor. So this is the notifying document that we actually have on our website for download. It's on the identity theft link that I gave in the last slide. This is the letter that you will send to each of the credit reporting agencies that will notify the credit bureaus of a death. So you will have to give the full name, social security number, the date of birth, the location of the individual's birth, and the date of the death. You are going to have to give that information over to the credit bureaus. Reason being, that's how they are identifying this individual. That's how they're connecting the individual to the credit report. So I know a lot of people can get a little nervous about giving over that information to the credit bureaus or really anybody. And I understand it, and I applaud you for being suspicious of giving over that type of information. But in this situation, you're going to have to give over that information to the credit bureaus in order for them to connect the credit report to your deceased loved one. So you'll fill out one of these letters for each of the credit reporting agencies. So you'll check off, and this is an interactive document on our website that you can fill out. So you'll be able to check off Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, and then you'll fill out the information. So you could use this exact form that we have on our website and save it on your computer and send it directly to the credit bureaus, if that's what you are interested in doing. So again, if you're looking for that link, it's this link right here, the consumer.sc.gov identity theft unit, ID theft. That's where you'll find this letter. It's going to be down at the bottom. That's where you can find it. So who else to notify after a loved one dies? The DMV. So driver's licenses, you're going to want to let them know that this driver's license is no longer going to be used, that this person has passed away, because somebody may use the number on your loved one's driver's license to go out and apply for other things. So you're going to want to let them know that this driver's license is no longer applicable. Financial institutions, we talked about this, so you can find all of this on the credit report. But when we say financial institutions, this also includes like investments. So if this should be involved in like the estate, if your family member has done estate planning, if they did not, and say they had like a 401k or some other retirement fund, you may have to reach out to that financial institution separately if there wasn't some sort of planning done to let them know that your loved one has passed away. And in these instances, you are going to have a document of a death notice and to let them know that it is real. Insurance companies, so auto insurance, health insurance, life insurance, etc. Memberships programs. People think that this may be too much. Maybe think, do I really need to reach out to the public library and let them know that my sister died? And yeah, if you really want to be the safest possible and let them know that this account is no longer in use, then yes, you need to let them know that this account is going to no longer be in use, that this person has passed away. Fitness clubs, you want to let them know because you don't want them to be charging over and over again on a credit card, right? Because somebody passing away is going to get them out of a contract if they had a contract. So you're going to want to know, find out what membership programs they were a part of, if they were under any type of contract, and let those people know, or companies know, that your loved one passed away. Email and social media companies. I think this is especially important. Not saying that it's more important than the other ones, but I think a lot of people just say, no big deal. We'll just let their email sit there, or we'll let their Facebook sit there. Do not let a loved one's email just sit unused. It will be hacked. And then that email is going to be used in a nefarious way, in a bad way. And that is the last thing you want connected to your deceased loved one's name, right? Emails are hacked every single day because passwords are not as strong as they should be. And especially emails that go inactive for so long are the ones that are targeted the most. So please, please, please don't just let your loved one's emails go inactive, just sitting there. Deactivate them if you can get access to them. Reach out if they have a Gmail, whatever type of email they have. If you can't get access to that email, the companies like Google, even AOL, because AOL still exists. My mom still has an AOL. Those companies will, if you notify them, they do have procedures to help individuals who have loved ones who have passed away. So just don't let emails sit there. Same thing with social media accounts. I do know that Facebook has like memorial accounts now where you can let Facebook know that your loved one has passed away, and they'll do a memorial account where they'll put up, they'll keep the pictures there and people can post, memories about them and things like that. And it's a little bit of a different type of account. I don't necessarily have an opinion about that. The only issue I would foresee is if all of their information was still up there. If they have social media accounts that still have all of their private identifying information up there, like birth dates, or their children's names or their other loved ones' names on there, that might be a point where you need to think, okay, I think it's time that we just deactivate their accounts in general. It varies. Somebody just asked the question of how do you notify social media about a death? It varies based on the social media platform. So for Facebook, you would go into settings. I know for Facebook, they have a whole process of how to notify about death, and probably could find it through a quick Google search. Same thing through Twitter. They all have their own process of how you would do that. But I would just really be wary of leaving somebody's private identifying information, social media profile out there, especially if they were super active, because that is a treasure trove for identity thieves to use that information, or at least act like that person, copy that profile, and then act like them after the fact. So it's something to consider when you're trying to figure out what to delete and what to keep. So here are some additional key steps to protecting a deceased loved one's identity. All the things we've already talked about are the things that you need to be doing and are going to protect your loved one's identity after they die. But number one thing is you need to report as soon as possible. I know this is extremely difficult, especially if you're in the throes of grief. It could be difficult to think, hey, I now need to write a letter to each of the credit reporting agencies. That's like the last thing you want to be thinking about, right? But the sooner you do it, the less time you give to identity thieves to use your loved one's information. Avoid putting too much information into an obituary. So things like birth date, addresses, mother's maiden name, or other personal details that could be useful to identity thieves. I mentioned earlier that there have been reports of criminals who really scan obituaries, and they will find out what homes may be vacant, break into those homes, steal just items, or specifically look for private identifying information so they can steal those people's identities because they now know that that person is deceased. So be very careful about the personal details that you're putting out there when you're writing somebody's obituary, especially one that's going to appear online and probably remain online forever, and in the newspaper. And limit information access to family members. This is a hard one, and I understand that. I mentioned it earlier, in some cases, identity theft can be tied back to a family member. So to avoid this problem, what you can do is centralize the access to the deceased person's information to one person. That then they can share it with other family members on a need-to-know basis. So all of those files, all of those, if your loved one was tech savvy, hard drives, and also any money, investment accounts, financial information, things like that. It's a need-to-know basis. So this is trying to keep things as confidential as possible to the fewest amount of people possible, because we do hear of family members taking advantage of other family members, especially when they've fallen on hard times. So they do things that they wouldn't necessarily normally do. One thing I did write in the notes here that I want to mention is you're going to have to request a lot of copies of official death certificates for communications with all of these different companies. When I was doing research for this, the IRS says you should really honestly request at least 10 official death certificates when you're requesting them. And you're going to need at least one for each of the credit reporting agencies. And then you'll need one for each of the financial institutions. So depending on how many companies or organizations, financial institutions that your loved one is working with, it really can add up to how many official death certificates that you may need to prove that your loved one has passed away. But you'll need those in order to protect your deceased loved one's identity. So order more just to be safe. And I wanted to put this out there just in case for anyone, if you think you've been a victim or you think a loved one has been a victim, please contact us. You can call us at 803-734-4200. We got real people answering the phones, or you can go to our website at consumer.sc.gov. And I've mentioned those links before. If you download the slides, you can go directly there from the slides. And I'll actually pull up the website right now so you can see it. So here's our website. And right here on the front page, it says, how do I? And you click on this. This is our top 6 areas that we hear the most from consumers and businesses. So if you want to report identity theft, you'd click here. It's going to take you straight to this identity theft page. That sample letter I mentioned earlier about notifying credit bureaus of a death, it's right here down at the bottom, this sample letter. But how to report is right here, reporting identity theft. You can fill this out online or you can just call us. But we've got all of these checklists here for you to go through in case you think you've been a victim. We also have an identity theft toolkit here. All of these things are free. Everything we do is free here at the agency. So even if you don't know if you've been a victim, don't hesitate to call and just ask. That's what we're here for. So I would rather you guys call and ask questions and for us to try and answer and hopefully be of help and get you to the right place rather than you wonder and wait too long and then it's too late. So please don't hesitate to call us. That's what we're here for. Everything we do is free. You can follow us on social media and you'll find all of our scam updates there, some additional tips. We put all of our webinars on YouTube after the fact, almost all of them. So this one will be on YouTube either later today or tomorrow. So if you want to send this to somebody, they can watch it after the fact. And again, everything we do is free. You can order publications and we'll send them straight to your door. Any questions? Answer the one question about how does one notify social media about a death? Does anyone else have a question? Okay, really good question. So how does it impact the family if deceased person's identity is stolen? You can be left with the bill, is really what it is. So it's like any other type of identity theft. So first of all, you don't want your loved one's identity to be used by anybody else. But at the end of the day, if somebody is racking up charges on or loans, credit cards, whatever else on your loved one's credit report, if you are connected to that loved one, depending on what type of loan or debt or whatever it is, you could end up having to be responsible for those charges down the line if it's not reported. So that's why it's so important. Any type of identity theft. So it's kind of the same idea of if you don't report a fraudulent charge on your debit card after a certain period of time, because there are time limits, you're not going to get your money back. And you're out of the however many dollars that were stolen. So that could affect you in the long run. It depends on what type of loan, things like that. That's really the biggest influence, and the biggest thing to think about is you don't want to have to be the one connected to that individual and then end up having to pay that debt down the line. A couple of other questions. This one's not, I mean, it's a little related, not directly related. Any tips to prevent hackers? I don't know if that's super related. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication. You need to be, this is a cybersecurity question, and we have a full cybersecurity basics webinar on our YouTube channel if you want to go watch that. But really, it's about upping your cybersecurity. So multi-factor authentication, the strongest passwords possible, and using the strongest internet protection on your home routers, things like that. But sometimes hackers are just going to hack. So it's about putting what protections you can. How can you find out if your deceased loved ones has insurance policies? This is a good question. It really depends on what jobs they had in the past. A lot of times through Social Security Administration, like their benefits. So if they had like life insurance policies, there should be some sort of evidence of that. This is when it's really good to have conversations with your loved ones about their life planning, what type of accounts that they have, and do they have these things written out? Do they have a will? So this is why estate planning and having a will is so important. So that way, you don't need to have a fancy attorney. You don't need to pay, because a lot of people think, oh, well, I can't afford an attorney to do a will. You don't need to necessarily do that. It's about talking with your loved ones and having the communication of saying, okay, yeah, I do have a life insurance policy through this company. But if that loved one has already passed away, then honestly, it's about going through their documents and maybe contacting their old places of work, seeing if they had any policies through there, things like that. Do you suggest going through this activity if your loved one has been deceased for over 10 years and there has not been any indication of theft? Yeah, yes, for sure. If you haven't looked at their credit report, then you need to. And because you don't know, if you haven't looked at their credit report, then you don't know if there hasn't been an indication of theft. Because a lot of times, even living victims of identity theft may not see any of the red flags of identity theft for years of time. And then they look at their credit report for the first time in a couple of years, and it turns out there's new credit cards that they didn't know that they had. So if you haven't been looking at their credit reports, I would suggest that you do, just like you do for yourself. And just to make sure that their credit reports have those stamps on them, that they are a deceased individual. So just double check, make sure that's all there. I would just to be safe. Okay, That's all the questions. I hope I have answered everybody's questions. Please, 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 if you think you've been a victim or you think somebody in your family has been a victim, call us and we can try and help out. I hope you guys enjoyed today. Have a good day, everybody.